One day she looks at you like your oxygen. Her attention locks in. Her energy leans forward. Every signal says you matter. You feel it in your chest, that rare certainty that this is real. And then it happens. Overnight, the temperature drops. Her voice cools. Her presence thins out. The woman who couldn't get enough of you now treats you like background noise. No explanation, no closure, just distance. And that silence hits harder than rejection ever could. This is where most men break themselves. You replay every word, every moment. You search for the mistake that must have caused it, because the alternative feels unbearable. The thought that her desire wasn't stable, that it wasn't anchored, that it could burn hot and vanish without warning. You tell yourself she must have lied, or changed, or played you, because believing that feels safer than the truth. But here's the shock most men aren't prepared for. She didn't fake that desire. She didn't manipulate you. And she didn't suddenly become someone else. What disappeared wasn't attraction. It was a state. A psychological and emotional condition she was in when she wanted you obsessively. And when that state ended, so did the version of her you were attached to. The mistake men make, the one that keeps them stuck in confusion and self-blame, is believing those two versions of her contradict each other. They don't. They coexist under different internal conditions. And until you understand what causes that shift, you'll keep chasing the ghost of the woman who wanted you, instead of understanding why she left that state in the first place. This is where the real tension begins. Because once you see it clearly, you realize the problem was never whether she wanted you. The problem is that you never learned how female desire actually turns on, and why it shuts off just as fast. The myth that traps most men is simple, intuitive, and quietly destructive. If attraction is real, it should be consistent. You believe desire should behave like commitment, steady, predictable, gradually deepening over time. So when her intensity spikes and then disappears, you interpret it as a verdict on your value. You assume something broke, something failed, because in your mind, real attraction doesn't fluctuate. It stabilizes. That belief feels reasonable, but it's built on a male model of bonding that was never meant to explain female desire. Men bond through continuity, through repetition, through time spent and patterns maintained. When something feels good, you want to stay inside it. You extend it. You reinforce it. Consistency makes you feel secure, and security strengthens attachment. So you expect desire to follow the same path. But female desire doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in episodes. It rises, peaks, and recedes based on internal regulation, not loyalty, not intention, and not abruptly promises. This is the critical distinction most men never learn. Female desire isn't anchored to attachment the way male bonding is. It's anchored to internal states, nervous system states, emotional charge, psychological intensity. When those conditions align, attraction can feel overwhelming, even obsessive. When they don't, it can shut down completely without warning. Not because she stopped liking you, but because the internal environment that allowed desire to exist has shifted. Women bond through emotional spikes, through moments of heightened intensity that pull them out of baseline consciousness. Those spikes create memory, meaning, and impact, but they are not designed to last indefinitely. The system self-regulates. After intensity comes withdrawal. After expansion comes contraction. This cycle is normal, but men misinterpret it because they're looking for continuity where none was promised. And this is where the confusion deepens. When she pulls back, you chase consistency. You try to restore what felt stable to you, not realizing that stability is exactly what neutralizes obsession. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Consistency is comforting, but comfort is not what creates obsession. Comfort soothes. Obsession disrupts. Comfort settles the nervous system. Obsession destabilizes it. So when you push for reassurance, clarity, or steady connection, you're speaking the language of male bonding to a system that doesn't respond to it. You think you're preserving attraction. In reality, you're regulating it down. The myth keeps you stuck because it convinces you that her fluctuation means something went wrong, when in fact, fluctuation is how her desire works. Until you release the need for consistency as proof, you'll keep misreading intensity as a promise, instead of understanding it as a state that was never meant to stay. When she wants you in that overwhelming, almost unreal way, she isn't operating from balance. She's operating from emotional deregulation. This is the state men romanticize without understanding. It feels intoxicating from the outside because it looks like certainty, hunger, intensity. But internally, it's a temporary suspension of her usual regulation systems. Her emotions are running hotter than normal, faster than normal, and that speed creates the illusion of permanence. This is why it feels so convincing when you're inside it. In this state, desire doesn't hesitate. It surges. The first component is heightened emotional charge. She feels intensely alive in her body and mind at the same time. Sensations land harder. Attention narrows. Her normal filters the ones that keep her cautious, measured, self-protective soften. She isn't calculating how things look or where they're going. She's responding. That responsiveness feels like openness, but it's actually amplification. Everything is louder internally, which makes you feel uniquely powerful in her world. The danger is that amplification is unstable by nature. It burns bright, but it also burns fast. The second component is identity expansion. In this phase, she becomes a bolder version of herself. She says things she normally wouldn't. She takes emotional risks she usually avoids. She feels less restrained, less careful, less bound by her typical self-image. This is where men make the fatal mistake of assuming they've unlocked her true self. But it isn't her baseline identity, it's an expanded one. Expansion feels liberating, but it's also taxing. Holding that version of herself requires energy, and energy always seeks balance again. The third component is future blindness. Consequences fade into the background. There's no mental space for what happens next, or what does this mean. She's anchored entirely in the present sensation. This is why desire feels absolute in this phase. Undeniable. Total. But here is the insight most men miss, and it matters more than anything else in this state. Desire feels absolute, but it is not anchored. It isn't tied to long-term intention or attachment. It's tied to the intensity of the moment. And moments, by definition, end. When the state dissolves, the desire doesn't gently taper, it disconnects. Not because you lost value, but because the internal conditions that created it no longer exist. That state can't last because the body was never designed to live at that intensity. Emotional spikes feel intoxicating, but they come at a cost. When her desire peaks, her nervous system doesn't interpret it as something to sustain, it interprets it as something to recover from. This is where men misread the entire situation. You expect continuity because the feeling felt so real, so consuming. But her system is already moving in the opposite direction, seeking balance the moment the high crests. Every surge of emotional intensity triggers recoil. Not consciously, not morally, biologically. The nervous system is built to regulate extremes, not live inside them. After heightened arousal comes compensation. After expansion comes contraction. This isn't a flaw in her psychology, it's a safeguard. Without it, she would stay emotionally unprotected, overstimulated, and exposed. So her system pulls back. It cools. It distances. And from the outside, that regulation looks like withdrawal. This is where men personalize something that was never about them. You feel the temperature drop and assume rejection. You feel the silence and assume regret. But what's actually happening is internal correction. Her body is recalibrating after being emotionally deregulated. The intensity you experienced wasn't meant to stretch forward in time. It was meant to peak and resolve. When it resolves, her demeanor changes not because she decided anything, but because her system needs rest from the heightened state. The problem is that compensation doesn't announce itself gently. It doesn't explain. It simply shows up as distance, less warmth, less urgency, less openness. And because men are wired to read continuity as truth, that distance feels like betrayal of what just happened. You think, if it was real, this wouldn't happen. But that's the misunderstanding. It was real, and that's precisely why regulation is required afterward. Coldness isn't a decision, it's recovery. It's the nervous system lowering stimulation, reasserting boundaries, returning to baseline. She isn't evaluating you. She isn't revising the past. She's regulating the present. And the more intense the spike was, the stronger the recoil needs to be. This is why the drop can feel so dramatic. The higher the emotional elevation, the deeper the need for grounding. Men who don't understand this try to interrupt the recovery phase. They push for connection. They demand clarity. They try to hold the high in place. But interference only amplifies the recoil. Because now her system isn't just recovering, it's defending. Until you grasp that the cold phase is not a verdict, you'll keep fighting something that was inevitable. The state couldn't last. Not because it was false, but because it was powerful enough to require an ending. The invisible switch that turns her desire off isn't something dramatic. It doesn't look like conflict, or boredom, or loss of attraction. It looks like understanding. More precisely, it looks like expectation. This is the moment men unknowingly activate the shutdown without realizing they touched anything at all. After the emotional spike fades and her system begins to recover, you start to anticipate her. You think you know where she is, what she's feeling, how she'll respond. And that subtle certainty changes everything. Expectation makes her feel red. When she senses that you're already predicting her reactions, already assuming continuity, she becomes aware of herself again. She starts watching how she's coming across. She monitors her tone, her timing, her distance. That self-monitoring pulls her out of sensation and back into control. Desire doesn't disappear because she lost interest. It collapses because awareness replaced immersion. The state she was in cannot survive observation. This is where men misunderstand their role. You think understanding her is connection. You think anticipation shows attentiveness. But psychologically, expectation removes space. It flattens mystery. When she feels anticipated, she feels predictable. And predictability drains polarity. The emotional charge that once felt electric now feels scripted, not because you did something wrong, but because the unknown, the tension she was responding to, has been resolved too quickly. Expectation also creates pressure without words. Even silence carries it. She feels the weight of what you're waiting for, even if you never say it. That pressure forces regulation. Her system tightens to reassert autonomy. And from the outside, that tightening looks like coldness. But inside, it's self-protection. She's pulling back into herself because the moment no longer feels open-ended. It feels decided. The psychological effect is immediate. Self-monitoring replaces spontaneity. Control replaces expansion. And once she's back inside her head, desire has no room to operate. This is why men are so often confused by the timing. Things don't end at the peak. They end right after, when expectation enters the space. When you start behaving as if the moment means something specific, as if it has a defined future, you collapse the ambiguity that kept it alive. This is the line most men need to sit with, because it explains everything that feels unfair about the shift the moment she feels understood too quickly. Mystery dies, not slowly, instantly. And with it goes the version of her that wanted you without hesitation. She doesn't turn cold because she changed her mind. She turns cold because the conditions that allowed desire to exist were replaced by certainty. And certainty, to her nervous system, feels like an ending. This is where male instinct turns against itself. The moment you feel her pulling back, everything in you moves toward fixing it. You seek clarity because uncertainty feels intolerable. You ask questions to stabilize the ground beneath you. You look for reassurance, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is wired to restore continuity when something breaks. And without realizing it, every one of those moves accelerates the shutdown you're trying to prevent. Seeking clarity feels reasonable, even mature. You want to understand what changed. You want to name the shift so it can be corrected. But explanation forces her back into analysis. It asks her to define something that was never conscious to begin with. The moment she has to explain her distance, she becomes more aware of it. That awareness tightens the system further. What was a natural recoil turns into a defended position. Now she isn't just cooling down, she's protecting herself from pressure. Asking for reassurance deepens the problem. Reassurance shifts emotional weight onto her. It makes her responsible for regulating your state while she's still trying to regulate her own. That imbalance is felt immediately. Desire can't coexist with emotional caretaking. The more you look to her to confirm stability, the more her system pulls away to regain autonomy. What you interpret as care, her nervous system reads as demand. Trying to recreate the moment is another quiet mistake. You reference the intensity, bring it up indirectly, try to spark the same energy again. But moments born from deregulation can't be summoned on command. Attempting to revive them only highlights their absence. It turns something spontaneous into something forced. And force, even subtle, collapses the polarity that made the moment powerful in the first place. Increasing availability is the final blow. You stay closer, you check in more. You make yourself more accessible, thinking presence will rebuild connection. But availability under these conditions feels like hovering. It removes space, and space is exactly what her nervous system needs to finish regulating. Without it, withdrawal becomes sharper, not softer. This all circles back to one principle that cuts through the confusion. Explanation creates pressure. Pressure triggers emotional shutdown, not because she's cold or cruel, but because her system cannot regulate while being observed, questioned, or leaned on. You chase consistency. She escapes regulation. And the tragedy is that your instincts are correct for male bonding, but misaligned for female desire. Until you recognize that mismatch, you'll keep trying to solve the very thing that needs space to resolve itself. Stopping the hot-cold cycle starts with abandoning the instinct to control outcomes. The moment you stop chasing intensity, the dynamic changes. Intensity is not something to be pursued or prolonged. It's something that arrives under specific conditions and leaves when those conditions shift. When you chase it, you communicate dependency on a state that was never meant to be held. That dependency becomes pressure, and pressure is exactly what keeps the cycle alive. Let the spike be a spike. Don't cling to it. Don't treat it like a promise that needs to be secured. Equally important is what you don't do when she pulls away. You don't punish distance with silence or resentment. And you don't reward withdrawal with increased effort. Both reactions tie your behavior to her fluctuation. Punishment introduces emotional volatility. Over-effort introduces need. Either way, you lose your center. The reframe is simple but difficult. Her distance is not a problem to solve. It's a phase to allow. When you treat it neutrally, you remove the friction that forces her to defend it. This is where emotional pacing becomes critical. Pacing is not withdrawal. It's steadiness. You maintain the same grounded presence, whether she's leaning in or leaning out. When she spikes, you don't inflate. When she cools, you don't collapse. That consistency isn't about availability. It's about internal regulation. Your nervous system becomes the stable reference in a dynamic that otherwise oscillates. And stability, when it isn't demanding, feels grounding rather than dull. Staying grounded means you don't interrogate states. You don't ask where things are going. You don't analyze what changed. You let moments end without commentary. States have a natural lifespan, and when they're allowed to complete, they leave less residue. Interrogation extends them unnaturally and turns recovery into resistance. Silence, when held calmly, allows regulation to finish. This approach feels counterintuitive because it removes leverage. You're not trying to steer her emotions. You're refusing to be pulled into them. That refusal creates contrast. It restores polarity. And over time, it reshapes how she experiences you. You become associated with emotional safety that doesn't smother, intensity that doesn't demand, and presence that doesn't fluctuate with her moods. This is the dangerous truth most men overlook. The man who stays steady becomes the reference point, not because he controlled the cycle, but because he stepped outside it. This is the truth most men resist, because it dismantles the story they've been telling themselves to survive the confusion. She didn't lie to you. She didn't play you. And she didn't suddenly reveal her true colors. What she did was respond honestly to different internal conditions. And once you see that clearly, the emotional chaos you've been carrying begins to reorganize itself into something colder, calmer, and more precise. When she wanted you intensely, That desire was real. It wasn't an act, a manipulation, or a tactic. It emerged because her internal chemistry aligned in a way that allowed it. And when that chemistry shifted, her behavior followed. Not out of malice, but out of regulation. The mistake men make is assuming desire is a promise. That once expressed, it carries an obligation to remain. But desire doesn't operate on moral continuity. It operates on psychological and biological conditions that rise and fall independently of intention. This is why trying to hold her accountable for past intensity never works. You're appealing to loyalty in a system governed by chemistry. And chemistry doesn't negotiate. It doesn't remember what it felt like yesterday. It responds only to what is present now. When the conditions change, the response changes. Not because she's inconsistent, but because the system is adaptive by design. Understanding this doesn't make you cynical. It makes you accurate. You stop personalizing fluctuations that were never about your worth. You stop chasing explanations that only add pressure. And most importantly, you stop confusing desire with devotion. Those are different forces. One is volatile and state-dependent. The other is built slowly, through regulation and trust. Mixing them up keeps men emotionally reactive and permanently off balance. This is the identity shift that matters. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to secure desire and start becoming someone who understands its mechanics. You no longer cling to spikes or fear drop-offs. You recognize them as signals, not judgments. And in that clarity, something changes in how you move. You become steadier, less reactive, harder to destabilize. Sit with this line, because it explains everything you've experienced, but never had language for desire, isn't loyalty. It's chemistry under specific conditions. When you stop demanding that chemistry behave like commitment, you finally step out of the cycle that's been pulling you apart. There's a quiet moment that comes after understanding settles in. Not relief, not triumph. Something heavier and more stable. You realize how much energy you spent chasing a version of her that was never meant to stay. How many nights you replayed moments that felt permanent only because they were intense. And how often you mistook emotional spikes for meaning, for truth, for something you were supposed to hold on to. That realization stings, but it also strips away illusion. Because once the illusion breaks, the cycle loses its grip. You stop needing her reactions to tell you who you are. You stop measuring yourself against her fluctuations. The silence no longer feels like a verdict. Distance no longer triggers panic. You see it for what it is, a natural shift in conditions, not a commentary on your value. And in that clarity, you recover something most men lose in these dynamics: your center. You stop reacting to emotional weather and start standing in your own internal climate. This is where your presence changes. You don't harden. You don't withdraw. You simply stop chasing what cannot be chased. You allow moments to exist without trying to freeze them. You allow connection without demanding permanence. And paradoxically, that restraint creates more gravity than effort ever could. Because now, when intensity appears, it's not something you cling to. It's something you can hold lightly, without fear. What remains is quieter than obsession, but stronger than attachment, a grounded steadiness that doesn't rise or fall with her state. And that steadiness does something subtle but profound. It becomes the constant in a dynamic built on fluctuation. It becomes the thing she can move around without destabilizing you. Not because you control the cycle, but because you no longer disappear inside it. And when you understand this, you stop chasing the version of her that disappeared and start becoming the man who doesn't disappear when she does.